Hello everyone! Today we'll be talking about one of the best DPSs in the game, the Karenina and the Alpha. So let's start with Karenina. Well, Karenina we already know from the previous video that she's mostly a fire type of DPS. Her physical is quite low and she's one of the best actually in every single content we have here in the game. So there will be a lot more better characters released in the future, but for now Karenina is the best. As far as I know, when we compare it to the Chinese version of the game, Karenina is still one of the best actually. So let's talk about her. So most people prefer to build for Shakespeare memories, and actually we need to talk about what these memories do. Well, basically they're boosting stats of the characters, and every single character has their specific sets. Sure, every character can be built differently, but sometimes it's better to build the specific gear which boosts their potentials at a maximum. For example, for Karenina is 4 Shakespeare and also 2 Darwins. And what does the Shakespeare do? Shakespeare actually increases all types of attack by 3% and the fire damage by 7%. That's the 2-piece set. And the 4-piece set actually has a chance to inflict burning damage, and also there's a 20% chance that it will inflict a fire explosion. That's kinda very good, and it also reduces the fire resistance of the enemies, and we do 8% more fire damage. As for the 2-piece set, we're using Darwin. And what does Darwin do? And actually Darwin is pretty good for most of the constructs because it generally increases the all damage when you're using every single time any type of ping, and that's actually quite good. But some do prefer some different kind of memories. For example, Coty is one of the best for Karenina as well. And let's talk about Cody as well, and why do some people prefer to use Cody. Actually, to be honest, it's quite good in, for example, Warzone, because it actually gives you more energy and it requires 20% less energy to activate your signature move. Signature moves are basically the ultimates. So in some cases I would really prefer to use 2 Cody and 4 Shakespeare. I might even make as a permanent build using 4 Shakespeares and 2 Codys. Okay, let's talk about her skills and orbs. Let's start with the red orb. Basically Karenina is a fire DPS, but she also does a physical damage. And how does this work? Well, she's kinda unique. Every single construct is unique, but the Karenina has some unique mechanism in her. For example, when she's attacking, usually she does a physical damage, but in enhanced mode she does a fire damage. And how does this enhanced mode trigger? Whenever you're feeling a gauge, and mostly the gauge is feeling when you're using the red orbs, or when you're using the ultimate or 3 pings and etc. When her enhanced attacks are activated, she's mostly doing fire damage, and she does quite a lot of damage with fire. As for the normal version, the normal attacks, when she doesn't have that gouge field, she's doing physical damage, but there is still something unique about her. Whenever she's using the 3 pings on the physical damage, as you can see the percentages are quite high. She also gains a super armor, which is kind of necessary for her to survive, because she has slight of delay when she's using the red orb. When she's using the red orb, she's kind of swinging her weapon, and it has like a 2-second cast or something like that. So that's why she needs this enhanced armor to have a little bit of survivability. The second orb is the yellow one, and as you can see, she's still a tanky skill. Whenever she's using this skill in normal mode, she's reducing incoming attacks by 30%, and she's also kinda doing a small leap, like jumping in the air and close to the enemies. I kinda like engaging in the fight with this skill. It's quite good. And as for the enhanced version, in enhanced version she's doing a lot more fire damage, and this is actually an AoE damage. Well, let's talk about the blue orb. The blue orb also does physical damage in normal situations, but when enhanced she's doing fire damage. And there is also one uniqueness in this skill. Whenever you're using several pings, it summons actually some small cannons, and they follow you for a specific amount of time. And it's quite useful actually to do this extra little damage whenever these cannons are following you. Okay, let's talk about passives and etc. and actives and etc. So the main basic attacks do the physical damage mostly, but when it's in enhanced mode, it basically converts to the fire damage. Signature move, yeah, it's kinda expensive to use all full energy on one skill, but it does a lot of damage. And the best way to deal this ultimate, you must be as close as possible to the enemy, so you could hit it like multiple times. It also adds a small burning damage to the enemy. The QTE skill is a fire damage skill and is quite OP because it does a lot of fire damage, and it's basically adding you extra damage bonuses on the force passive. The 5 passive is like whenever you enter the combat it gives you additional 3 signal orbs. Let's continue to the passive skills. The passive skills is like basically enhancing your damages whenever you're using 3 pings or whenever you're using the signature moves. And second passive is the leader's passive. It basically gives you attack bonus, and all the attackers are increasing their attack like 5%. The others are like pass through extra fire damage when you enter in the thermal mode. The thermal mode is that basically filling up that gouge we were talking about earlier. Extra damage bonus enhanced skill increases by 10% additional damage. And the last passive is quite interesting. It actually reduces the fire resistance of the enemies, and it's by quite a lot. 15% is quite decent. And that's basically it for the Karenina. This has all of her skills, all of her pluses. As for the minuses, I don't actually call it a minus, but the main minus of Karenina is like you need to be mobile. So you need to dodge a lot, because some of her skills, as we talked earlier, require some casting time, and that's basically like 1 to 2 seconds. And you need to be careful that you don't get hit during that period. And next is up Alpha, one of the best physical DPSs in the game. And most people think that yeah, there will be a lot more different types of physical DPSs releasing in the future, but let me tell you that Alpha will be one of the best, and always will be, probably. I don't know, otherwise they need to release something better which will beat Alpha. Even in this video my Alpha isn't fully upgraded yet, and this isn't the final version of the Alpha, because I don't even have her weapon, and her signature weapon changes a lot, believe me, a lot. Okay, let's start with her weapon. Well, every single time any single orb is pinged, the physical damage increases. And not only that, when it's stacked up to 10 times, her special hidden skill has extra sword wave orbs. That means that basically you're doing twice as much damage with this weapon, so you definitely need to get her weapon. Well, let's talk about her memories. One of the best sets for her is Patton set, 4-piece set. And I know some people even prefer to build Frederick or something like that, but to me I think Patton is great because it increases not only physical damage but crit rate as well. And if you're not critting, it further increases the crit rate of physical hits, and it's rising up to 20%. That's quite a lot. And also the crit, every single time there is a crit hit, the physical damage increases by 5% as well, and it can be stacked 3 times. So that's total of 15%. So this is a quite good set for her. As for 2-piece set, some people prefer Cody, some people prefer Darwin. Well, Darwin is merely the better one because it increases the damage farther. But as for Cody, for example, you could have to use less energy to activate the ultimate, because her primary damage isn't only the shockwave mode, it's also the ultimate, and it does quite a lot of damage. Well, in general cases most people use Patton, but we could also use Hana set because it increases the sweeping damage, and not only that, it also helps you to activate the shockwave mode faster. And why? Because when we are using sweeping mode, it automatically gives you another signal orb upon entering the matrix. So yeah, basically this is a good choice in Warzone, but you could try either way, either Hana or the pattern set. I prefer pattern set for maximizing the damage, but in some cases it could be possible to use Hana set because that would be the better option in this kind of cases in Warzone. So I'm directly skipping to the orbs because there's not much to be said. She's 100% physical damage dealer, and every single skill of her does physical damage. And to be honest, she's kinda hard to manage because most of the time when you're performing a physical damage, she's doing a lot of jumping around back and forth and etc., and it's kind of hard to dodge attacks during this period. But let's talk about Red Orb first. Red Orb does a physical damage, jumps forward, and basically it knocks back the enemies if it's 3 ping. Again, as Karenina, Alpha also has that skill to gain a super armor just in case, so she doesn't get damaged, and that's quite good for her. Let's move on to the Yellow Orb. And I personally like all of Alpha skills because basically she's like jumping back and forth, but I did say that it's hard to manage her. But in these orbs can be used to dodge incoming attacks and jump forward and etc. For example, Yellow Orb does exactly the same. It charges forward and it basically runs through the enemies and does physical damage to everyone in her pass. Let's move on to the Blue Orb. Blue Orb basically is like her booster, and it increases her movement speed based on the orbs you have pinged, and it's quite actually good when you use it just before you enter the shockwave mode, because it will further increase the damage of the shockwaves. Also, an extra damage will be dealt when you're entering that shockwave mode, as it's said in the description. As for her hidden skill is activated like this. You have to use 3 blue orbs, and after the blue orbs you just basically need to use any 3 pink orb to enter the shockwave mode. In shockwave mode you're basically firing shockwaves, and every orb you have will be converted to the shockwaves, and it does quite a lot of damage. As usual, the basic attacks are just regular basic attacks. It does physical damage. Moving on to signature move, it costs a bit less energy than other characters, and it's doing a lot of damage in physical form. Physical damage 2200 on level 13 already. As for the other passives, Lucia uses rising flashes that deal physical damage in total and sends the target airborne. Yes, when you're attacking a lot of times, it can cause this kind of reaction. Oh, the fourth passive is basically extra damage. The fifth passive is giving you 3 orbs like every single construct. Well, let's move to the core passive, and this is her hidden move. When you use 3 blue orb and 3 any kind of orb, it will enter the, well, it's called blade wheel mode, but I'm actually calling it shockwave mode because it's firing shockwaves, some kind of projectiles, and it does quite a lot of damage. The later skill is adding extra attack and crit rate to all attacker type constructs. The passive is, well, it basically increases your physical damage. The fourth passive is, again, it's increasing the damage in the shockwave mode. Then the last one is, in under the effects of playing a blue orb, physical damage is increases by 20%. Yeah, that's extra physical damage. Yeah, some people say that is necessary to have SSS rank and etc. Yes, of course it will increase damage by further, but yeah, even S rank is quite enough. But it's always good to have like SS rank characters. This is basically it for Alpha. And by the end of the video, I would like to make a small demonstration of Alpha versus Karenina. But this is a bad comparison. I'm just showing off their skills, what they can do, and etc. And the good thing about this game is that, well, if you compare many games that have like this stat called the battle power or combat power and etc., there is like huge difference mostly when, even though the characters have the same amount of combat power or battle power, but in Punishing Grey Raven, when the battle power of the characters are same, basically in same amount of time they do exactly the same damage, well, if we sum it up. So here are like small demonstrations of Alpha and Karenina, so you could see how much damage they're doing even with this bad build. Well, I'm calling it bad because they're not fully finished. Well, I have to apologize for that. I'm not as much of a spender. I'm mostly free to play, and this is all I've got for now, and you have to judge it by this build.
私の力はどう？存分に楽しいの？